Come on! Unity is a web series filmed and edited by Emily Jansen as she lives in her vehicle, traveling the United States and documenting the many other types of alternative living, exposing audiences to the growing change in perspective and lifestyle for a common unity.
Milagro Cohousing, I believe, follows the kind of definition of cohousing, which is private spaces with shared facilities around that. So in kind of its truest sense, everyone owns their own home, but they're conjoined. They're two-story townhomes, and so you have neighbors usually on your left and right, and we have shared space around us. There's 43 acres here, and of that, only 9 acres are developed, and the rest is preserved open space. In terms of water and wetlands, all of the water from all of the homes stays on site, and that was a big important factor. That means that we have to be careful with what we put down the drains, so there's no harsh chemicals allowed in the community, and that attracts people who have chemical sensitivities, so it's an upside for them as well. But all of our water flows downhill to our own wetlands, which has a kind of elaborate system of pumps which filters out contaminants and bacteria and sends it back uphill through pumps to water all of our fruit trees. And we grow pomegranates and lemons and tangerines and limes and figs, so we have fruit year-round for the community, which is great. In terms of purchasing in Milagro Cohousing, there's not a formal process to become a resident. We encourage people to learn as much as they can. We want people to attend meetings and see how we function and make sure it's going to be a good fit, because we can't legally tell someone that they shouldn't buy here, because if people own their own home, how do you tell them, sorry, you can't sell to that person? So we really do encourage people to know what they're getting into, and it seems to work for just about everybody who wants this kind of housing. I grew up in the Midwest in southern Indiana, beautiful small hometown, and I remember a hand-drawn map on the refrigerator of the neighborhood. I would just say, I'm going to be at so-and-so's house, and I'd point to the map, and I would just run out the door. And that was the 70s and the early 80s. And life is different now, and there's been stories in the paper of parents getting arrested for sending their kid to the park without parental chaperones. I mean, the fact that it's questioned whether your kids can walk down the street to the park on their own is kind of a scary thought. And I know there are towns where you can still do that, but we wanted a place where we felt comfortable with our kids running free. We wanted a place where we knew our neighbors and we wanted to be supported and supportive of them. There's no street in America where there's not one weird person on the street, right? You always know the person down the street who's a little bit odd, and I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but the difference in cohousing is you not only know what makes some people more unique than others, but you know what makes them tick. You work with them, you sit in on monthly meetings with them, you're on committee meetings with them, you know exactly where they stand on something, and you can take into account what their position is going to be so that you can include their preferences, their lifestyle, their needs, so that you can have a solution to something almost before you have a discussion on it. You know right away what's going to be the issue. And so it's not so much a con, it's actually, I'm turning it into a benefit, because by living in a co-housing community, you know these things about people. They're almost like extended family, and you know how to work with them. But at the same time, it can be infuriating when you're trying to select a LED fixture that's 24 inches tall that puts out 3 watts of electricity, and you're arguing about, aspects of that. So we finally have gotten to places on that, but it continues to be a work in progress. And our procedural approach to meetings, our consensus process, our decision-making process, that has all gone through exhaustive research and training, and we embrace the system and the process of getting to a decision. And as infuriating as it can be in some of our meetings and our years-long discussion on things that you would think would be easily passable, when you finally do get a place of everyone agreeing with it, you've really accomplished something, because you haven't been a HOA president with a gavel who's imposed a certain decision. You haven't alienated anyone. You've finally gotten to a place where actually 100% of the people have said, okay, thank you for considering my concerns. Thank you for looking into my questions. Thank you for acknowledging me. Let's move forward. And when 100% of the community is on board with the decision, that's pretty powerful. And that makes you feel good about living somewhere. So I really enjoy that kind of aha, whether it takes a few weeks or 8 years. I've talked to a lot of people who are not co-housing dwellers about this lifestyle, and many of them have a far-off look, like a glimmer of what if, as you can see them kind of consider that lifestyle for themselves. And to most of them, immediately dismiss it as, quote, not for them. Oh, I could never do that. And the misinterpretation, I suppose, of it is that I don't want to have to live my life in agreement with other people. I want to be able to do my own thing. And what they don't seem to understand about co-housing is you do your own thing. You own your house, you go in your door and you close it, and that's it. You do whatever you want inside your house. But if you want to go on the patio and have cocktail hour with your friends at 6 o'clock, that's 30 feet away. And if you want to have a really inexpensive organic homemade meal every Saturday in the common house with 40 friends, that happens every weekend. But if you don't want to do it, fine, stay in your house and have popcorn for dinner. So I don't think that everyone should necessarily make a radical change, but I think everyone should be aware that it exists as an option. And there's a whole lot of communities in America, and probably elsewhere, where you don't know your neighbor, you don't know their name, and there could be someone in a desperate need next door, and you've never said hi to them in 30 years. We've had some situations where we had to call 911 and get an ambulance in, and the entire community came to life at 2 in the morning to help this person out. But it's not for everyone, I acknowledge that. But everyone should be aware of the upsides because it is significant and it is worth it. It's worth it for everyone if they were willing to try it out and not just dismiss it. It was a monumental life change for the core group of people who came together 20 years ago and had this idea to buy 40 acres of the desert and build 28 family units. It was a massive, massive thing, and they had to put in a lot of money to get it started, and they had to fund houses that weren't sold yet. It was a scary thing, and a huge percentage of co-housing communities never come to fruition. It's a hard thing to do, to work together, to find financing, to get the permits. We were really lucky that we were one of the few successful ones, and we're still going strong. But that doesn't mean that everyone has to make that huge life change on a dime. You can definitely start small. You can open up a wall between you and your neighbor's house and have a shared backyard space and have cookouts once a month for your neighbors on the street. You can have an annual street party, and maybe out of that, if you find some people that are kindred spirits with you, maybe then you can consider purchasing something and starting something on your own. It's the idea that we get away from your house is your castle and no one's allowed and no trespassing. That I hope those days are over. I hope they're coming to an end, because if we're not here to support each other, I'm not really sure what we're here doing. So co-housing is just one of the shining examples of how you can get there. And it's certainly not the only way, but it's great for me.